Blue Roots Denver is a blues and jazz feature film project dedicated to showcasing contemporary, Colorado-based blues and jazz artists in live performance, while celebrating the lives, history, personalities, and venues who helped shape the scene we enjoy today. We were inspired by the rich history of blues and jazz that began in Denver's Five Points neighborhood and lives on in today's vibrant music scene. Blues and jazz are among the greatest of American cultural creations, and many cities have grand traditions in both styles of music. But Denver, Colorado? Absolutely. From the dawn of the music's creation to the modern day, Denver has been and continues to be a hotbed of blues and jazz culture. Many players have come out of Colorado and went on to national fame. Denver's Paul Whiteman led the most popular Sweet Orchestra of the late 20s and early 30s. Although his music contained little authentic jazz content, he featured some of the best jazz soloists of the era, including Bix Beiderbecke, Eddie Lang, and Jack Teagarden. For millions of white Americans unfamiliar with black music, Whiteman's orchestra was the sound of the jazz age. Raised in Denver and tutored by Paul's father, Wilberforce Whiteman, saxophonist and tuba player Andy Kirk traveled Kansas City, where he led the hugely popular 12 Clouds of Joy, which included the pioneering pianist-arranger Mary Lou Williams. Trombonist Glenn Miller left Fort Morgan, Colorado to pursue a music career, eventually leading one of the top orchestras of the swing era, and became a World War II hero when his plane was lost over the English Channel while commanding his Army Air Force Big Band. Paul Quinochet, a native Denverite and veteran of our city's late-night jam sessions, achieved acclaim as a Lester Young-styled soloist in the Jay McShann, Johnny Otis, and Count Basie big bands. He even cut a record with modern jazz legend John Coltrane. Tenor saxophonist Phil Urso left Denver to begin a career in modern jazz, playing in New York with Miles Davis, recording with Horace Silver, and touring with Woody Herman's Third Herd, eventually becoming one of trumpeter Chet Baker's most trusted sidemen. Abruptly leaving the coast's jazz scene just as he was set to conquer it, Phil resettled in Colorado, where he enjoyed his status as an elder statesman of the mile-high jazz scene. Some left town and found big city fame, while others remained in the mile-high city and built the jazz and blues scene we know today. The man rightly dubbed the father of Denver jazz, violinist, bandleader, and businessman George Morrison Sr. was one of hundreds of visionaries who helped to build our mile-high blues and jazz culture. Classically trained at a time when blacks could not find employment in symphony orchestras, Morrison learned to jazz it up and formed a group of regional all-stars, including, at various times, Jimmy Lunsford, the aforementioned Andy Kirk, and even, very briefly, early jazz legend Jelly Roll Morton. The band's vocalist, Denver-raised Hattie McDaniel, was destined to become far better known as an actress, becoming the first African-American to win an Academy Award for her performance as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. Departing Denver for New York City and later Europe in 1920, Morrison's band played command performances for British royals and recorded for Columbia Records. Victor Recordings took an interest in Morrison's singing jazz orchestra, but balked upon learning that Morrison was a Columbia exclusive artist. When asked to recommend another Western group that played similarly well, George thought of his hometown friend Paul Whiteman, who then signed with RCA Victor. Whiteman's earliest 78 sold in the millions, while Morrison's became obscurities. Soured on big city business, but still very much enthused for music, Morrison returned to Denver. Denver boomed all through the swing era, with big bands booked for dancing pleasures at huge ballrooms like the Rainbow at Lincoln Street and Fifth Avenue, and amusement parks such as Lakeside and Elitch Gardens. Of course, you can't discuss blues and jazz in Denver without specific mention of the Five Points neighborhood. Located just north of downtown, from the 1920s to the 50s, Five Points was a Harlem of the West. Our city's black residents had little say in the matter. For decades, this was the only neighborhood where they could buy homes and build lives. The center of African American culture in the Mile High City, Five Points was an essential stopping point for touring bands. Between Kansas City and the West Coast, Denver was an epicenter for blues and jazz music like no other. Five Points' main drag, Welton Street, boasted dozens of clubs catering to the tastes of Denver's blues and jazz lovers. George Morrison Sr. himself opened and operated one of the landmark clubs for black entertainment, music, and dancing, the Casino Cabaret at 2639 Welton. Ray Charles, Jimmy Smith, B.B. King, Jimmy Witherspoon, Ike and Tina Turner, and James Brown all rocked the joint. Leroy Smith, an entrepreneur, concert promoter, and the first African American on the Denver radio airwaves, opened the Colorado Negro Voters Club at 2617 Welton Street and brought big-name stars to the Points. The Adderley brothers, John Lee Hooker, Jimmy McGriff, Gatemouth Brown, and Gene Harris and the Three Sounds were just a few. One of the few city hotels accessible to African Americans, the Rossonian at 27th and Welton, put up the greatest of American blues and jazz artists, and gave them a place to perform, too. Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Nat King Cole, and countless others made the Rossonian a home away from home. When lodging couldn't be found for visiting black musicians, Five Points residents would open their homes to put up the greats during their Denver visits.
God bless my cousin Charles Burrell for being my mentor, because not only, he's retired now, but at the time he was in the prime of his career, he was such an expert classical player and such a dynamite jazz bass player that he was leading two lives. He would play with the symphony and leave the symphonic hall and go play in a club. So he introduced me to the greats who were passing through Denver. There were two musicians unions in the city of Denver. The Negro Union, George Morrison had founded the Negro Musicians Union. Well, in order to play with the symphony, Charles had to be a member of the white musicians local, right, before they amalgamated. So what he did, he scammed them until he got caught, because he would tell one that he was a member of the other, and he said he had children to support, so he said, I didn't have to pay union dues until they caught up with me. But because he was such a great, and is such a great musician, he backed a lot of the great national artists who passed through Denver. And in fact, I can recall 1952, it was either late 52 or early 1953, my mother got this call from Charles. My mother was a great professional cook, and she always had pot of food somewhere. And Charles called my mother, Laverne, I'm bringing somebody home to eat. And she said, okay. She got up out of bed. I'd gone to a concert to see this person play. So this person got in Charles's car, and we went to my parents' home at 2140 Franklin Street. And this person's name was Errol Garner. And Errol Garner, I'd gone to see Errol Garner play, and Charles backed Errol Garner because he was the only jazz bass player in Denver at that time who could read music, and he could sight read. And Errol Garner said, hey, Charlie, man, I'm sick and tired of white folks' food. I want some good soul food. So my mother got out of bed, and she always had greens and cornbread made, and my father was a great fisherman, and so she thought up a whole bunch of crappies, and she was frying fish, and Errol took those size 13 shoes off and sat and belched and ate until about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then went out to the hall and got on my piano. And he played a song, and he said, "Hey, Charlie, man, I want you to follow this too." And Charles said, "What is it?" "I don't know, man." You know, Errol couldn't read music. Right. His brother is, yeah. And he said, "Hey, Charlie, play this tune." And Charles said, "What is it?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "It goes something like this." The very first known public performance of Misty was done with Charles Burrell accompanying Errol Garner.
Late-night jam sessions blazed into the wee hours of the morning at spots like Lil's on 29th and Welton, where the house pianist was a young Cedar Walton, then a student at the University of Denver and soon to be famous as a member of Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. Rice's Tap Room, the 715 Club, the Melody Lounge, the Waiters and Porters Club, and dozens of other rooms swelled with the infectious sounds of blues and jazz. In recent decades, 5 Points has fallen on some hard times, and the jazz and blues has largely migrated to other parts of town. But a new cadre of musicians and business people are determined to bring the scene back to the Points. The question remains, will the new 5 Points be one that the neighbors of the 40s and 50s would recognize and feel welcome? We hope it will be, but only time will tell. Nowadays, the blues and jazz scene in Colorado is as strong as ever. Our top-rated collegiate jazz studies programs yield a bumper crop of young talent every year. Many educational nonprofit organizations raise awareness of our music. Venues continue to bring international and locally based world-class artists to the people, and all summer long festivals book the top blues and jazz acts to perform in the city and up in our scenic mountain towns. And of course, you can listen to high-definition jazz and blues on your radio at 89.3 FM in Denver and KUVO.org worldwide. Sorry for the shameless plug there, James.
Blues and jazz has a great tradition in this town, and the modern-day scene looks pretty healthy, too. Now, we're excited about the future of this music in Denver, which is why we hope you'll join us again here at the McNichols Civic Center building in late summer for the live music of 4 of the bands featured in our film and a screening of the full production of Blue Roots Denver. Check it out.
That woman, gotta love her with a thrill, 'cause if you don't, some other man will. You got to love her with feeling. Now let me tell you right here. Now you see my old lady, she's gonna wanna fight because of the hour I'll be getting in tonight. I don't care. You see, the night I'm gonna do just like like I choose. Yes, I am. I want you to take off those fast records. Play me some of those down home blues.
Oh, well, I might take a train, I might take a plane, but if I'd have to walk, I'd go in just the same. I've been to Kansas City, here I come. Well, got some crazy way of loving there, and I'm gonna get me some. I better believe it. Yeah.
"29 pearls in your kiss, you're singing smile, coffee smelling lilac skin. There you are once again, flaming me, and in your house I stand here, naked and proud, and even now you're undressing your feelings with me. So here you are in my bed. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. And here you are once again, in my head, in my bed. Tell me the truth. So don't say it's love.